Hi, everyone. Welcome to this recorded session of Homeschool Help. I have to record it because I'm moving this week. I wasn't planning to do this, but I just realized that I can't do the scheduled time. So I'm postponing and we're just going to record some answers to some of the questions that I've gotten. I've gotten a number of questions, so I'm excited about that because I'm just excited that people are having the conversation, that they're at least considering what to do next and considering how valuable their children are and how best they can serve them. So I'm just going to dive right in. I have a number of questions that I've been collecting. The first person, Lindsay, reached out and said, what's a good program to use? She has 2 kids and she is brand new to homeschooling. So first of all, I don't know the ages of your kids. And so for me to say what a good program is, there are many out there. I quite like Classical Conversations. If you can find a community that's near you, I would urge you to go and check it out because the classical education model changes. It's so different from the education that we grew up with in public school. I grew up in the public schools. So it is, and it's so far removed from that because the schools today are not involved in education. They are primarily preoccupied with schooling, which is different. And so the classical model sort of turns all that on its head. So I would highly recommend you look into Classical Conversations, and they serve children from the very beginning all the way to the end, to high school and actually beyond. My high school junior is also enrolled in a dual enrollment program in college through Classical Conversations. So it goes all the way through. So that's one program. For younger kids, I've heard that Abeka is very good. I've also heard Veritas Press is another program that's available that's quite a bit online as far as I know. And so, but it's also gotten really great reviews. And then there are other sort of supplemental ways to augment your children's learning. In fact, I know families who only do speech and debate. Basically, that's their education model because they work in all the other stuff into the speech and debate components, the various forms of speech and debate. And I'll just give you a quick recap. Actually, I have to do a recap for debate. We had 2 more debates this week. It's been amazing watching these children grab hold of these big ideas and try to articulate defense for certain ideas, even when they disagree with the idea. It's a phenomenal thing. I highly recommend speech and debate. So I'll tell you a quick story. I was at a speech tournament because my children were enrolled in it. And I was sitting at lunch with some of the moms and, new people, and we're just chatting and where are you from and this and that. And somebody brought up Classical Conversations, and the mom sitting next to me said, oh, you can't do Classical Conversations and speech and debate. And I kind of looked at her and I was like, really, why do you say that? And she said, oh, it's just too much. It's just too much. It's too much for everybody. I mean, the Classical Conversations model just requires so much work. And then to augment all of that with extra work for speeches and debating and whatever. And I kind of smiled. I looked at her, I said, we do both. And she said, you do? How do you get it all done? So I guess we weren't as fervent into the speech and debate area as perhaps she was. Maybe her kids do 6 events and mine only did 3 or something like that. But it's sort of where there's a will, there's a way. My son is now taking the philosophy course and doing the college level philosophy course. And he keeps saying to me how much he really enjoys it. I checked in with him yesterday. I said, are you, up to date? Because we've been traveling and moving. And I said, I need to check in with you and make sure because, you can fall behind for Classical Conversations, but you can't fall behind for college because that goes on your record. You want to go to college. So that counts. So you got to stay on top of it. He said, Well, for the philosophy, I won't fall behind because I'm really enjoying it. In fact, I'm ahead because I'm reading ahead because I'm really enjoying it. And so, if you find something that appeals to the child and appeals to their brain, they will embrace it and they will want to learn it. But we're so steeped in the school paradigm that education is hard and yucky and distasteful and too challenge. Like, we're so steeped in that our sort of offset is, oh my gosh, how am I going to cram all this knowledge into my child because they're going to be as reluctant as I was when I was in school. And it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't be that way. We want our children to embrace learning. We want them to desire to learn. We want them to have fun learning. Wouldn't it be better for everybody if it was fun? And yeah, sometimes it's challenging, but then on the other side of the challenge, it's like, yay, I did it. So we do hard things because they're more gratifying than if all we did was just the easy stuff that's just sort of, playing games all day, right? So you got to mix it up a little bit, but it really should, as a whole, be fun, be exciting for the child. So, okay, that is my answer to that. Kate is looking for guidance and lessons learned. Kate, I encourage all of you to go and look at all my videos that are available online on YouTube. Lots of short little videos just talking about one thing or another. And they include many lessons learned. I also encourage you pick up a copy of my book, because my book is my story. The first half is why you should homeschool, basically what's wrong with our education system today, which it's not an education system, it's a school system. But the second half of the book is how I did it with my kids. And it includes lessons learned, because I learned a lot of lessons while I was doing that. So I suggest those two. I also highly recommend this, my devotional, Teach from Love. It is a school year devotional for families. And you can start it at any time. There's no reason to start on January 1st. Well, actually, it wouldn't start on January 1st. And in fact, there are no dates in it. So every day, I'm just going to show this. You have a story. It's a title, and then right, here we go. It's a title, then it's a Bible verse, then it's a little short story, and then some questions about the story and about the value that we're talking about. And for this week, for the first week, I chose to do the values of boldness and fearlessness, because I figured that was a good way to start, right? Especially starting a new project, which this is. And then so every week, and look how pretty it is. I just love what we did there with the little graphic, week 1. And then you have 5 days in the week, even though there are 7, but we just do 5. So Friday, you have Friday. And then opposite Friday, you have a page for annotations, because your kids will say things that you might not be like, that might strike your fancy, and you want to be able to write them down. And you might have, I'm hoping you'll have insights that will come from the discussion. So when you talk about boldness and fearlessness, which are two different things, but they're closely related. And that's how I did the whole book. The next week is virtue and moral excellence. Two different things, but very closely related. You want to have these conversations with your children, because your goal for your child is not that they get a good job and a corner office, because that doesn't bring happiness. Your goal for your child is excellent virtue and character, because virtue and character can bring them happiness, because then they'll know how to find it. But if you don't teach them how to find it through excellence in virtue and character, then they will never find it. So patience and self-restraint is one of the weeks. Listen up. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. James 1:19. And then At the bottom, you have the quick little devotion, Lord, help my self-restraint. So I put others first in every conversation, because the story is about a conversation and people not listening to each other. And then a question, why is it challenging to be quick to listen and to be slow when it comes to speaking or becoming angry? What a great, profound conversation to have with children of all ages. Why is it difficult? Think about that and think about what you could do to maybe um, improve in the way that you in how quickly you anger or how poorly you listen, right? What is something you deal with every day that requires extra patience? Patience, I'll tell you, it's funny that I turned to patience for week 6 because patience was the reason that I wrote the book. It was the impetus, the instigator, if you will, for writing this book. I was teaching a group of 7-year-olds, and I would put godly characteristic up on the board every week. It was a once a week gathering, and I would put a godly characteristic up on the board. And for this particular week, I put patience up on the board. And I would say to the kids, okay, tell me what patience means. And they were like, well, you waiting, you just wait. That's patience. And, we kind of got stuck. And I said, okay, what's the opposite of patience? And of course they said impatience, but that's, you can't define a word using the word. And I said, well, okay, so what does it look like? Well, it looks like, you get angry, red in the face and frustrated and maybe lashing out and all of that. And I said, so really the opposite of patience is anger. And that was just an enormous. So when people say, I don't have the patience to teach my children, I don't do this, but I should. I want to, but it seems rude. But my first question is, why are you so angry? Patience, having a difficulty being patient is an anger problem. And it's anger management. And of course, we want to teach our children anger management. So the best way to do that is not to display anger to them, right? It's to show them how we control our anger and all of that. Okay, I got a little bit off track. Let's move on. Okay, she didn't ask a question, but Diane asked a question. She said she was going to email me questions. Well, I have some emailed questions. I don't know if I'm going to get to yours today. Do homeschool parents receive educator discounts? This is from Marta. Marta, you can get discounts. You simply qualify yourself as a teacher. One way to do that, I recommend, is enrolling for HSLDA insurance. And they are a fantastic organization. I've been enrolled with them since I started. It's not terribly expensive. And if you ever have an issue with with the state, right? If you ever have an issue with the state or any kind of authorities, you can just call them up on the phone and tell them this is the issue, and they will come to your rescue, generally speaking, if you're a member. I remember when California outlawed home education, and it was HSLDA and some other groups that just, boom, hit them with tons of lawsuits and put a stop to that almost immediately. So we reversed that decision right away. So I highly recommend them. And then they will send you a card that says teacher. And then you go to, it depends on where you're going, but Barnes and Noble had a teacher discount, as I recall, that I availed myself of. Staples or Office Max, at least one of those stores has teacher discount. There are places that give teacher discounts. So you just say, yep, I'm a teacher. There you go. And you don't have to explain more than that. You don't have to say, I'm a homeschool teacher. You don't have to say anything like that. They'll ask you, they may ask you what school. And typically you need to be affiliated with a school, as far as I know, for most states. Although what that school is varies by state. So in the state of California, where I used to homeschool, I established my own school. I actually did the same thing here in Florida. Okay. Um, Terry, my daughter refuses to pull her 9-year-old daughter out of government school, though she knows what the truth is about it. I don't get it. I would help if she needs it. She will homeschool her little boy who is 2, but yet not my granddaughter. So I, that wasn't much of a question. Should she, I'll make some up. Should she pull her daughter out of government school? Yes, absolutely. I think that much is obvious. We wouldn't be having this conversation if I thought otherwise. How do you convince your daughter to homeschool? You don't, you offer. You simply say, I would like to take on all of the schooling responsibilities for your daughter. Could we work out a deal? Just do it. And if the daughter refuses, then I can't. Then I don't know what to tell you because she's in charge of her daughter, right? You're not in charge. But if you want the girl to be homeschooled, simply make the offer. Especially since you say you would. You're saying you would help. Maybe she's not aware of how easy it is to home educate. In that case, I would refer her to my videos because it simply is not as hard as the school wants you to believe. The school wants you to think it's hard because that's job security for them. It's really that simple. Let's see. Okay, so hold on. Different ideas for rotating kids through learning centers. Structures, procedures to keep kids focused and on task while I am with a sibling. And she has toddlers. So she has older kids in high school, and now she's apparently starting over again somehow and has little toddlers. It does sound a little bit, Julia, like you are running an education center. And 2, 3, and 4-year-olds shouldn't be on task. That's my opinion. I think they should be on task in the sense of you need to go outside and find me as many worms as you can, or find me 3 different kinds of beetles, or I want you to collect different kinds of leaves and press them, or play on the swing. Kids need to be, yes, they need to be engaged, but they don't need to be on task. So, and then the other thing that I know was very effective is when they're that young, they have toys. Well, the toys go in different bins. And what you do is you separate the toys so that they get one bin for one day, and they don't see that bin of toys for the rest of the week, so that the following week it's sort of all new again. So you rotate that a little bit. Christy Clover, I think she's at the Busy Mom. She has some great organizational tips on organizing your areas for preschool and grade school for kids. She's super organized. She's sort of the Martha Stewart of the younger years homeschooling, maybe even up into the older years, but I remember her from the younger years. Personally, I could never get into it that much, but kids really, they shouldn't necessarily be entertained all the time. In fact, I know a family that unschools, and people say, well, what happens when your kids get bored? And her response is basically, sometimes it's good for kids to be bored a little bit. They need to have that downtime to try to sort of consider what they might be wanting to do next, right? In fact, we all do. I'm seldom bored, but every once in a while, I just need to like take some time off and veg and recoup, right? So kids don't need to be fully occupied all the time. And so understand that there are people who unschool, and so they never give their children tasks to do. They encourage them in whatever their endeavors are, but education really should it's an organic thing, and we've sort of beaten the organic out of it at this point with our idea of public school. And public school is not the best way to get stuff done. It's just not the be all and end all. It's not the ultimate it worked for the masses. And if you want your child to be a widget and basically just like every other child, then I suppose it comes recommended. But we implemented public schools based on the Prussian system, which was engineered to create an obedient military. And so that's why we train our children to move at the sound of the bell, to not speak until spoken to raise their hand before asking a question. And, we think that it's just discipline and it's good. Yeah, there's a degree of that, but there's also a great, and I think a greater degree of detrimental effect with all of that as well. Okay, because it stifles the brain. It keeps the child in a box. They think that learning only happens in a box. It makes them dislike learning. It just has a lot of deleterious effects. So we'll do that. Okay. Hello, we are just waking up honestly and have 5 kids. 2 will be graduated, but our 3 youngest, we want to have them experience while learning. We've been seriously considering traveling with our kids in an RV, homeschooling, and letting them learn by not only our instruction, but from actual experiences. This week, we learn about the Grand Canyon, etc. Is this really achievable? Since we won't be in a single state, how do we follow proper guidelines? I'm nervous I'm going to do something wrong, and then my kids won't have the required diploma to grow in the future, if that makes any sense. Any advice? And this is from someone named Haley. I love your question. I love this question. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sending this. If you have the opportunity to get in an RV and travel throughout the United States, I would leap at that opportunity. I would not even ask any questions. I would just do it. And it's like, there's that old adage. Do you ask for permission or forgiveness? Ask for forgiveness. Don't ask for permission. I love the fact that you admit that you're nervous that you're going to do something wrong. Why is that? Because we're taught to not do things wrong. But in fact, how do we learn? We learn by doing things wrong. So stop being afraid that you're going to do something wrong. My answer on how you homeschool through it is that you homeschool in the state that you're a resident in. If you buy an RV and you sell your house, you're still a resident in that state until you take up residency in another state. So you're homeschooling in the state that you are vacating your residency from, if in fact you're selling your house, or I suppose renting it out. But to a certain degree, you need to have an address, right? And so wherever that address might be. Now, if you're saying, well, what we would do is we would take up residency sort of at mom and dad's house, and they're in a different state. Okay, then that's the state that you're quote unquote homeschooling in. Okay, so do that research, but don't be afraid. Don't be nervous. Don't worry about doing the wrong thing. What you would give your children with all that travel and exploration could be something magnificent. I'm so jealous. I want to do it. I think that it's phenomenal. And also be aware that some kids might not cotton to it. They might struggle with not having a permanent home. Although the RV is it would become the permanent home. So just, when you're doing something like that, just be aware of the various parameters and how different personalities are going to behave with that. But what a fantastic opportunity. I would run, not walk, to whatever the nearest RV place is and take care of that right away. I think that's just a phenomenal idea. Okay. Thank you so much for comments on my radio show, the Sam Sorbo Show, which is also posted on my YouTube channel. I really appreciate. This is an excellent discussion. Some of the same things I was thinking and wondering about. I haven't heard it anywhere else. Thanks. That's very kind. I really appreciate that. And here's another one. I'm thrilled that you've returned to your podcast. I really enjoy your Q&A with guests and monologues. Your voice is the lighthouse of these very foggy times we are in. Thanks for all you do. So thank you guys for reaching out that way. Please, Sam, I would love to hear info on the dropping the school. I think she's talking about the opting out of school. So it's called publicschoolexit.com, publicschoolexit.com. They have a ton of information there. They have curricula. They just have there's a ton of information there. I think that's what you're talking about, Jill. She says, I agree the school system is dead inside and the teachers are cuffed and can't teach each child as they need with 30 or more in a class. She relates to that. She was in the inner city schools. The books would be falling apart and from the 1940s, and they did nothing about it, just put duct tape on them to hold them together. Okay. I heard your presentation online at Rescuing Our Children conference last fall. Yeah. She has a 12-year-old daughter, Lori, who's been in Christian school since pre-K. She's considering homeschooling as an option for her in the future, concerned about not having her in a traditional school since she is an only child. So the thing is that I know that people say, well, children need other children. Not all children need other children. I have one child who is an extreme introvert. She does not really want to be around other children, only piecemeal, because she can only take a little bit at a time. So don't just go on some sort of cookie cutter of every child needs X, Y, and Z. I just highly recommend home education. And it's not, you don't then sentence your child to being at home. No, you can get an RV and travel the country. But further, more than that, you can have instruction at home in the morning, and then the child goes to karate class or youth group or basketball practice or art classes or anything at the rec center or what have you, goes to the gym maybe and works out. You're not just relegating your child to solitary because you're choosing to home educate them instead of putting them in a system which is not functioning very well, frankly. I wanted to get back to Haley because I forgot to address this last thing. Doing things wrong, and then my kids won't have the required diploma to grow in the future. Okay. Life does not require a diploma. Less so now than even before does it require a diploma. I know they say that, the dropout is terrible because kids need a high school diploma. That's not why dropping out is terrible. Dropping out is indicative of the child's unwillingness to learn. That's terrible. It's indicative of the child being let down by a system that supposedly is dedicated to the benefit of the child, but clearly is not serving the child. That's a travesty. I went to college. Don't tell anybody. I don't have a high school diploma. I never got it because I didn't have enough credits because I studied abroad my senior year. And Duke never asked me for it. So you can take a GED. You can get into college without a high school diploma. When you put on the child's record, traveled across the U.S., wrote a paper about the Grand Canyon, published an essay about Yellowstone National Park, all of these other things, those are credentials that no one else will have. Well, right? Very few other people might have. That speaks to the nature of the child better than any diploma can. So please, and this goes for all of you, think very strongly about getting your brain out of the box that it's in with regards to what's required to have a successful life. The schools don't know how to have a successful life. They're not teaching it. They don't teach children how to balance a checkbook. They don't, not that that's required for a successful life, but I'm just saying they don't teach the very basic things about life. They don't teach how to lease a car. They don't teach how to love somebody. They don't teach how to mourn somebody's passing. They don't teach quintessential things. Education used to be the pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness, such that the student would be able to identify truth, identify beauty, and understand goodness. Okay? Those are gone. They're not teaching that anymore. In fact, they're teaching the opposite. They're teaching there is no truth, which is a huge contradiction in the mind of every child. There is no beauty. Oh, it's just on you, whatever you think is beautiful. And there's no goodness because there's no good or evil, because everything is okay. Equality, everyone wins. This is what the schools are teaching. The last thing you want to do is subject your child to that kind of lunacy. It's lunacy. Now they're teaching the 1619 Project, which is, in case I don't, perhaps you haven't heard about it. So the 1619 Project is a project that was developed I think in accord with New York Times, or the New York Times picked it up and then, blew it out or whatever. But it maintains that the United States wasn't founded in 1776 by patriots who then fought the Revolutionary War. No, it was founded on slavery. And for that reason, it's an evil country, even though all the evidence points to the contrary. We forged the way for equality. But the 1619 Project attempts to turn that on its head. It's lunacy. It makes absolutely no sense. In fact, the first slave ship that landed in Massachusetts with slaves, the slaves were freed and the captain of the ship was put in prison because in Massachusetts, it was illegal to have slaves. So they were all set free. Thank you for coming to America. You're on your own now. Sorry about the long journey, but you're not a slave. So, in fact, I believe the first slave owner in the United States was a black man. It's not like we invented slavery, and it's not like we vanquished it and now slavery no longer exists. It still exists in many Arab countries. So the idea of putting only the slavery piece of the history of the United States under some odd funhouse microscope, right? And ignoring everything else that has happened in the United States in our history, that's a leftist idea to focus you on evil while they're saying that there is no good or evil. It's so funny. They defeat themselves with their own arguments. Anyway, I went completely off topic. We were talking about this idea that you're jumping through somebody else's hoops. And I would love for you to consider that maybe you're the best arbiter of what's good for your children. And if you believe that taking them in an RV to travel across the country for a year or for 2 years or for 8 years or sailing on a sailboat around the world, that you think that would be a good use of their time and efforts, then I rely on you as the parent because you know them the best. And I think that those sound like phenomenal ideas and great learning experiences. And at the same time, because I am an educator and this is how I work, I would certainly take textbooks along, and I would certainly encourage them to read the classics and do some research on the different places that I'm going. But that's sort of what you said. This week we learn about the Grand Canyon. Yes, absolutely. And when we leave the Grand Canyon, you're going to write a little book report or, a little report on what we did at the Grand Canyon. And depending on the age of the child, you will require certain elements to be present in the book report. And in that way, they learn to write. And why do we teach writing? We teach writing because writing is thinking. Not the way that it's taught today in public school, but typically writing is thinking. And we teach persuasive writing because then we are empowering our children to be able to persuade people of their ideas, which is what we want them to be able to do. Okay. I was going to talk about, let's see. Okay. I was going to talk about how we teach history, and I have just a few minutes left. And no, before I talk about that, we're going to discuss how you get your child to see you as the teacher, because I did have somebody write in with that question. How do you get your child to see you as the teacher? And this is probably from somebody who has just pulled their child out of school. Once the child is in school for any length of time, what happens is, in the child's mind, you did it, right? You took your child to the school, handed the child off to the teacher, and said, "This is your teacher, so you will listen to them now." And now you're coming back and you're sort of preempting the teacher and saying, "Now I'm the teacher." So how do you make that transition? First thing I would say is you talk to the child, and you have like a heart to heart, and you say, "You know what? I put you in school, and now I've realized that that was not the best place for you. And I've decided that the best place for you is home with me, because I can teach you. And so that's what we're going to do." The other thing that you have to also understand is that the school teaches the student that the teacher knows everything. And that's wrong. And that should never be. Okay? Because then what happens is we get a whole population that thinks that they can rely on the expert and never ask a question because the expert has spoken. And that's sort of why we're in a huge mess today. Okay. When you go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis, if it's a diagnosis that is unpleasant, you will often go to another doctor, because not every expert has every answer, and not every teacher has all the answers, including you. And so you have to transition the child with the new paradigm that the teacher is not the know-it-all. Okay. The teacher is the guide. The teacher guides the child in the learning. So, and you should not be ashamed. So when your child comes to you and says, "I don't understand why these characters are behaving this way in this book," you say, "Okay, let's talk about it. I don't recall." Say you don't even remember reading the book. You get the child to explain to you, "Well, what's happening? Well, why? So why do you think the character behaved that way?" Right? And you engage in the conversation, and you show the child, one, you're not afraid of learning. You're not afraid of admitting that you don't know something, and you're willing to put the time in that it takes to think things through. You're modeling for them how you think things through. And in that way, you become the teacher. You're not trying to beat into the child's head that you're the teacher now. You just become the teacher. Now, for older kids who are, well steeped in the institution, it might be a more difficult transition. I have recommended, and I've seen other people recommend actually, when you take a teenager out of the system, that you basically give them a month or months off, and require, say, only reading fun literature, not fun, good, solid, but also fun literature. So we're talking about classic literature that's good, solid reading. And that's it. Or maybe you just say, "Okay, you're just going to have one book a week, and then I want you to do some math." But you basically give them some breathing space so they can get accustomed to the new surroundings. Remember, they've been imprisoned for years in this paradigm, and now you're shifting the whole thing. The other thing that it does for you as the teacher is you take on the role of authority in a very good way, because now as the authority, you're saying, "You know what, take a break. Let's have some fun. Let's go for ice cream. I'm sorry, that is my go-to. I just love ice cream, and it just seems like that's like a break, right? Let's go to the beach today. Let's go hiking. Let's do other things, right? And when you go hiking, after the break, as you ease back into it, when you go for the hike, you say, you know what, let's see how many trees we can identify. Let's take the iPhone or whatever, and let's see how many different kinds of trees we can identify, or something along those lines that is more exploratory, in other words, educational, than just la, 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 la. And, your student has her iPods in and she can't hear a word you're saying. I would never recommend that, right? There's also something to be said for leaving electronics at home. So let's gather as many different kinds of leaves as we can and then go home and see what kinds of plants they are, or something like that, right? I'm just throwing out ideas. But that would be my answer to that. Okay. Managing a child who doesn't want to be homeschooled. That is a great question. In fact, I've done probably more than one video on that kind of paradigm. You need to become the child's hero. That doesn't mean you buy the child. It means that you set down some rules and you also use your authority to not necessarily break them, but bend them and become someone who can be appreciated for your strength and for your kindness. If your child doesn't want to be homeschooled, then you need to start a campaign to show why homeschooling is better than going to school. And that may take time and patience. I'm trying to think of sort of the scenario. And so the next time we do this, hopefully it'll be live and we can have some interaction with specific questions. In fact, I'm also going to start opening up some time in my schedule to do one-on-one coaching, for which I will charge. So you can consider doing that if you'd like. But I think the biggest takeaway, the biggest lesson that I'd like you to have from today is that as the parent, you are the authority and you're driving the bus. And so wherever you end up, it's because you drove the bus there. You cannot put any of the blame on the child because you're the driver of the bus. So if you're driving the bus and it veers off the road, it's up to you to get it back on the road. You can't rely on the child to do that. If you need to park the bus for a little bit and get out and walk around, go right ahead. And then get your bearings again and then drive that bus back up onto the road so that you're on the right road. Great. If your child is that distraught at being brought out of the institution and being home educated, then there's something that's wrong, that's deeper and really needs to be addressed, because education should be fun. So doing it at home should be enjoyable. And you need to find you also just need to find other avenues for the child to find some fulfillment and some enjoyment. And then you need to gently remind them, if you were in school, you wouldn't be doing this. So if your child likes ice skating, go in the middle of the day when other kids are in school. Find ways to take advantage of not being in the school in order to prove to the child. And you can be a little bit mischievous about it. You can be a little bit like, sure, you could go at 6 p.m., but you're not going to, because if you go at 1, you can say to the kid, see, otherwise you'd have to be in school right now. But instead we get to do this, whatever that thing might be. So that was always a thing that I took advantage of when I was hiring piano teacher, for instance. I would say, oh, and the kids are homeschooled, so we can do mornings any day of the week. We can do the morning. We won't impose on the schedule that you're keeping with the kids who are in school, because I'm not going to fight with them because I don't have to. And in fact, I prefer not to schedule anything at the end of the day when the traffic picks up and the kids are getting out of school and stuff. And so that's always been a really great benefit. So find the benefits of home education and tell your kids about them and make sure that they understand about them. Okay, last question. How do you teach history? History is storytelling. Stop with the names and dates and facts, unless you have very young kids who should be memorizing things, and then just give them stuff to memorize. But even when you're giving them stuff to memorize, you can make it a song, a jingle, that kind of thing, because they love that. A mnemonic. Kids love that. The young kids really love that kind of thing. So, we memorized the presidents. Number 1, George Washington. Number 2, John Adams. 3 was Thomas Jefferson. And number 4, James Madison. 5, another James Monroe. 6, John Quincy Adams. 7, Andrew Jackson. And 8, Martin Van Buren. And I don't know the dates. There is a song that has the dates in it also. I'm sure there's a song that has the dates and the wives' names, So that part, sure, when they're very young, but as they get older, they need the stories. They need all the stories. And why do they need the stories? Is because they are in a moment in time, and they need to understand how they fit in the long, long stretch of time. And that's what history gives them. So, for instance, there are a lot of people who are really discouraged by the current events of the day, the election, the inauguration, the current resident of the United States, all of this stuff. If you understand that we live in a very long time frame, I mean, we personally don't, but that time is very long, and we've been here before. There have been previous attacks on the Capitol. So for them to say, oh my gosh, this attack on the Capitol is the worst thing ever, not even close, not even close. The Weather Underground attacked the Capitol. There was a terrorist attack at the Capitol. Well, that was a terrorist attack. There were other, I'm just saying, like, it puts things into perspective, and it also gives them some grounding. So we do want to teach history. By the way, I used to hate history because it was always just names and facts and dates and places, and it was boring. I think they purposely made it boring. And then there was one book in 8th grade called The Way Our People Lived. I actually have a copy of it today because I went and bought it for my kids, that told stories about the time. And it puts you in the time, and you're like, oh, so people lived that way and they did these things. And that's the way we teach history. So I like Story of the World. I did that with all my kids. It's like short stories about the periods in history, and it goes by chronological. Thank you. It's chronological. They have workbooks as well. So that was a huge blessing to us, but there are plenty of other history curricula out there. The best way to find the curriculum that you want is to ask people what they've used. So for me, I've used Story of the World. It was very beneficial for us. So I recommend that. Other people will have other recommendations, and they'll give you their reasons, and then you pick one. And if it looks like it's not working, and by the way, different curriculum, sometimes for different children. Some children really respond to one. Other children don't respond to that one. They'll respond to something else. But history is storytelling. And if you don't know that and you don't like history, then you need to learn it through your kids, because it's magnificent when you really dive into it. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining me. I've enjoyed this, even though we didn't get to interact today. I will schedule another one, and I'll let you know by email. If you sign up for my email list, I'd appreciate it. And please tell your friends, because I'm trying to grow this movement. So if you'll share this with your friends, or at least share with them samsorbo.com, where they can see all the videos and sign up for the email list, I'd appreciate that. Bye, everybody.